What's up, Chiefs Kingdom? Noah Gray here, tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Josh's channel and check out showmefootball.com for more.
What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com. And it's finally here. Today I am doing my annual Keep or Cut Chiefs free agency preview video where I go up and down the list of impending Kansas City Chiefs free agents and tell you guys what I think about them, whether the Chiefs should keep them or whether they should let them go. The Chiefs have a pretty long list of free agents after their Super Bowl 58 victory. There's some key guys that they're going to have to bring back, and there's also some guys that I think they're going to have to make some tough decisions on, but that's the NFL, and you simply can't keep everybody every single year. So, guys, with all that being said, let's get into the list of impending Kansas City Chiefs free agents, and I'll let you know my opinion on them. I'm going to be doing the restricted free agents as well, but I won't be doing the exclusive restricted free agents because those guys are pretty much sticking around unless the Chiefs specifically tell them to go away. All right, guys, so let's do it. Let's start with by far the biggest name on the list, and that's going to be defensive tackle Chris Jones. Chris Jones, 29 years old, entering free agency. He will be an unrestricted free agent unless the Chiefs decide to use the tag on him, which I think is unlikely because his tag would be very expensive and would kind of hinder the rest of your free agency plans unless you can come to a long-term deal with him. By now, you guys probably know how I feel about Chris Jones. I think it's imperative that you get something done with him. I'm not going to sit here and have this whole debate with people who suggest we should keep L'Jarius Sneed instead or that we shouldn't extend Chris Jones. I really don't care. Chris Jones is a future Hall of Famer. They don't win the Super Bowl without him. He was extraordinary in the postseason. He is the catalyst of the defense. He's the engine to the defense. He's an absolute game wrecker. I think you can find L'Jarius Sneed if it comes down to him or L'Jarius Sneed. You can find another L'Jarius Sneed. Brett Veach has done a great job finding late round value defensive backs in the draft, but I don't think you're finding another Chris Jones, and that's why I think you got to find a way to keep him around. I don't think there's any chance that if you were to extend Chris Jones for a few more years that he's just going to fall off a cliff in the next few years. I think he's going to continue to be a really productive player, and he has probably a couple more elite years left in him, so I think you got to keep Chris Jones. Simple as that. Next name on the list is wide receiver Micole Hardman. It was cool seeing him catch the game-winning touchdown in Super Bowl 58. However, that shouldn't overshadow the fact that Micole Hardman was a net negative for this team ever since the Chiefs traded for him at the deadline and brought him back. That move always reeked of desperation to me, and I think this wide receiver room is going to see a lot of turnover, and if they're seeing a lot of turnover, I just don't think Micole Hardman can be on this team. I don't think he deserves to be on this team. It was cool seeing him kind of redeem himself to end the season, but I just don't think it should overshadow the negative player that Hardman is. He's a failed wide receiver. He's too turnover prone. I think you let him go. Next is safety Mike Edwards. And I don't think he'll be too expensive to bring back or anything. Maybe there's a team willing to shell out a little bit more money just because of the sheer amount of Super Bowl experience he has. He's now won one with the Buccaneers and the Chiefs. But I really like Mike Edwards. He's a really good glue guy for the defense. I mean, sure, you could find a replacement if he leaves, but the one thing that is hard to come by and what you have in a guy like Mike Edwards is that he just has a nose for the ball. I mean, how many times was Mike Edwards involved in a huge turnover for the defense? It was the same way in Tampa Bay, too, and it gets to a point where it's not by accident. The dude just has a nose for the football. I think he's a really good guy for the secondary. I would try to make a really honest effort to keep Mike Edwards. Then we got Drew Tranquil, linebacker, came over from Los Angeles. He was fantastic for this team this year. Really good in coverage, really helped shore up the middle of that defense. So the middle of the field wasn't so wide open for offenses all the time this year. I think you got to bring Drew Tranquil back, and I also don't think he'll be too expensive. We'll get to Willie Gay, who's also a free agent later in the list, but if I'm deciding between them two, I'm going with Drew Tranquil. Drew Tranquil is far more advanced than Willie Gay, so yeah, I think you got to keep Drew Tranquil. I mean, that one's a pretty easy one too. Next, we got left tackle Donovan Smith. I was skeptical of the Donovan Smith signing this past offseason, but he proved to actually be a pretty steady presence at left tackle. He didn't have a great Super Bowl, and he's not the greatest left tackle in the world. But Donovan Smith, I could see this team trying to bring him back, and I wouldn't mind it just because Wanya Morris kind of seems to be the future at one of the tackle spots, whether that's left or right. And if you're drafting another tackle, that just kind of creates a mess. It's like, okay, so what are we doing with Wanya Morris now? I think the best way to go about this is to sign a veteran left tackle again, whether that be Donovan Smith or someone else, and then you let Wanya Morris try to win that position in training camp and in preseason, and then we'll go from there. So, yeah, I mean, if they bring Donovan Smith back, I'm not going to be upset by it. He's a steady presence. He provides good depth. So, yeah, wouldn't be upset if they brought him back. We'll see what they do, though. Next, we have running back Clyde EdwardsHelaire. The team declined his fifth-year option before the season, which seemed like a pretty heavy indicator that this was going to be his last season in Kansas City. And credit to CEH, I've been hard on him ever since he was drafted here. I never liked the pick. I never liked the player. But he made the most of his touches down the stretch this year after Jerick McKinnon got hurt and he was kind of put into that RB2 role. He made the most of his touches. But that being said, I think you move on. I think you can add another guy with some more juice, a guy that has a little bit more chops and pass protection. CEH, again, made the most of his time here down the stretch, but I think it's time to move on from that draft pick and cut your losses there. Next, we have punter Tommy Townsen, who's an unrestricted free agent. I mean, he's a good punter. He was an all-pro punter here. I don't really see anybody shelling out a ton of money for Tommy Townsen, so I can't imagine there'd be too much competition for him. Maybe I'm wrong, but, I mean, yeah, if you can bring him back, you do it. Then we have guard Nick Allegretti, the postseason hero who stepped in for Joe Thuney after he strained his pectoral in the divisional round game versus Buffalo. Nick Allegretti really stepped up in a big way. There wasn't too much of a drop-off from Joe Thuney to Nick Allegretti. I know the Chiefs kind of view him as their sixth offensive lineman when they run a lot of heavy packages. Like Nick Allegretti's usually the first guy off the bench to come in for those. So, yeah, if it's for cheap, sure, yeah, bring him back. I like the guy a lot. If not, though, because he definitely seems like a guy where some desperate team like Washington is going to pay Nick Allegretti like 3 years, $24 million. And if they do that, all power to him. You find another Nick Allegretti in the draft. But if he's cheap, yeah, you can bring him back. Next, we have defensive tackle Tershawn Morton, who they have listed as a defensive end on Spot Track for some reason. But he was a defensive tackle. He started a lot alongside Chris Jones this season. I made a defensive tackle video yesterday about potential free agent defensive tackles the Chiefs could bring in, and I kind of mentioned in that video, I'll repeat it again here, Tershawn Morton feels like after being such a great story coming out of Missouri S&T has kind of hit his ceiling as a player. He's a good rotational guy, definitely should not have been starting. I think that speaks to the lack of depth at defensive tackle that the Chiefs had. I'd absolutely bring him back as a depth rotation piece, but I don't think you bring him back under the notion that he's going to be the starting defensive tackle next to Chris Jones, and that's if you keep Chris Jones. So, yeah, I like Tershawn Morton, but we'll see what the offseason looks like first, and then if Tershawn Morton is still sitting out there, then I wouldn't mind the team bringing him back. And then the first restricted free agent we have on the list is tackle Prince Tega Wanogho. He's a good swing tackle. He's a guy that can come in off the bench and give you some quality snaps. He did a couple times this past season, but then he ended up getting hurt. But I can't imagine that he would be too expensive to bring back. I think he's a good guy to have on roster. I think he's good for that position group. He's got that veteran experience. So, yeah, not too much else to be said there. And then long snapper James Winchester is an unrestricted free agent this year. Assuming he's not going to retire or anything like that, seems like a no-brainer that he's back. He's one of the longest tenured Chiefs right there next to Travis Kelce. So as long as James Winchester wants to keep playing football, you keep bringing him back, and he's not going to cost much. Following him, we have linebacker Willie Gay. Willie Gay has kind of had a string of tweets on his Twitter account suggesting that it's pretty much been decided that he's not coming back to KC. I don't know why he keeps saying that. I don't know if the front office has already told him that he won't be back next year. But assuming that's true, I get it. I like Willie Gay. He never really seemed to fully grow into what he was supposed to be, though. He's got all the athletic upside in the world, but Drew Tranquil is the better linebacker. Willie Gay's projected market value on Spot Track right now is $7 million per year. I'd be much more comfortable giving that to Drew Tranquil than Willie Gay. I thank Willie Gay for his contributions here, but he seems like he's going to get a decent contract from another team, and all power to him. Appreciate the contributions, but that's one that you don't overspend to bring back Willie Gay. Then there's backup quarterback Blaine Gabbert. Assuming he's not going to retire, assuming he wants to come back, that one kind of seems like a no-brainer as well, that the Chiefs bring him back. Chad Henne was the backup until he retired, and he was up there in age, so I'm assuming they're just going to keep bringing back Blaine Gabbert until he says he's done playing football. And I think Andy has kind of wrestled with the idea of having a developmental backup and someone that can kind of compete with Mahomes rather than the dusty veteran, but he opts to go with the dusty veteran every time, so I don't see why that would change now, because he trusts them to run the offense and not make any mistakes. So yeah, Blaine Gabbert should be back on this football team. Then there's running back Jerick McKinnon. Again, I think you could add a little more juice to this running back room. I really like Jerick McKinnon, like what he brings to the team. He really helps the red zone offense, really helps in pass protection, but the injuries just keep on coming for him as he's getting older, and I think he's the kind of guy that he'll probably still be sitting out there in free agency well beyond camp. Maybe sign him to the practice squad, keep him on ice to the playoffs, or unless you have an emergency or something at the position. But I'd be interested to see what is out there for the Chiefs in free agency at running back or in the draft before they make any decisions on Jerick McKinnon. After Jerick McKinnon, we have defensive tackle Derek Nottie after his one-year deal back with the Chiefs this year. And I'm just more unimpressed with Derek Nottie than I really ever have been. That said, there was a noticeable drop-off from him to everyone else after he went out in the postseason. The Chiefs don't have a ton of depth at defensive tackle, but I would try to find someone at this point that has more upside than Derek Nottie, someone that can stop the run but also can at least provide some pass rush, because Derek Nottie doesn't provide any pass rush at all. He's one-dimensional, and I feel like he's declined in the one area that's been keeping him on this team for so many years. So, yeah, Derek Nottie, he can go, in my opinion. Next up is wide receiver Richie James. I mean, I thought Richie James was solid. They didn't use him all that much. I think with the amount of turnover that's coming to the wide receiver position this offseason, I think the Chiefs are going to draft a guy, they're going to sign a guy, and there may be even more than that. And if you're doing all that, and if you're keeping Sky Moore and Rashee Rice is still here, it's just hard to see Richie James being on this team again, so I think he is gone. Then there's tight end Blake Bell. Tough to project. The Chiefs really like him. They like his blocking ability, but I'd be interested to see if maybe they try to add a free agent tight end that has a little bit more receiving ability because of how physically taxing this season was on Travis Kelce. Maybe they try to bring in a free agent like Noah Fant or a Mike Gesicki or something that's a little bit more of a receiving tight end. But then again, we've seen this team keep 4 tight ends on the roster before. Jody Forson, he's a restricted free agent. We'll get to him later down the list. But it's not impossible that the Chiefs just keep 4 tight ends again, and then they keep Blake Bell because he's also kind of a fullback, and he lines up in those I formations. So because Andy doesn't carry a fullback anymore, you kind of look at Blake Bell as the fullback. So in that case, maybe he's back. But yeah, we'll see. Then there's safety Deon Bush. Deon Bush is there to be the 4th safety or 5th safety, whatever, and he's there for special teams. If you bring him back, cool. If not, then you'll find another Deon Bush. Then we have the second biggest name on this list, and that is cornerback L'Jarius Sneed. Obviously, if the finances work out, you ideally want to keep him and Chris Jones. Like, the best case scenario is that you keep L'Jarius Sneed. But like I said, I value Chris Jones more than L'Jarius Sneed. I think Chris Jones comes before L'Jarius Sneed. And if paying Chris Jones means you can't keep L'Jarius Sneed, then I'm completely open to the idea of tagging and trading L'Jarius Sneed. And then that will give you a lot of ammo in the draft to bring in another cornerback. You can sign another free agent. I just think that gives you the most options. It gives you the most financial flexibility. Again, I don't want to say that I want to trade L'Jarius Sneed. The best case scenario is keeping both L'Jarius Sneed and Chris Jones, but since I already talked about Chris Jones and he's my priority number one, I'm just preparing people for the idea that you could tag and trade L'Jarius Sneed. But bottom line, yeah, you try to keep him. Now we're on to Jody Forson, who's a restricted free agent. I like Jody Forson, rooted for the guy to make the roster for a long time, finally did, but he's just really struggled to stay healthy. I mentioned the idea of bringing in a free agent tight end that's a really good receiver, so you can finally give Travis Kelce a breather, and I think there will be guys out there that are better than Jody Forson that are able to stay healthy more than Jody Forson, and I kind of struggle to see this one working out. I struggle to see him being on this team next year just because of that ability to stay healthy and where you're at in Travis Kelce's career. You need somebody else. Then we have restricted free agent defensive end Malik Herring. I mean, the Chiefs like him. He's been here for a few years now. He's a reserve defensive end that can get after the quarterback if you have attrition hit or whatever. He can give you some quality snaps in the regular season. Sure, why not? Then last but not least, we have Mike Dana, defensive end, unrestricted free agent. I've seen some crazy projections for Mike Dana up into this point. Like right now on Spot Track, they have him making $16 million a year. I'm sorry, Mike Dana is not worth $16 million a year. I think he's really solid. He's good at setting the edge, but his pass rush win rate is far too mediocre for him to be making $16 million a year. You can go and you can draft another Mike Dana, or you expect Felix Anudike-Uzomah to kind of step into that role and take over, or you sign someone else that's cheap. Like, look, the Chiefs got Charles Omenihu last offseason for 2 years, $20 million, and like $10 million guaranteed. Spotrac has Mike Dana making 3 years, $50 million with an average salary of $16 million. I'm just not doing that. You can find a better player than Mike Dana for like half that price because the Chiefs just did it last offseason and Charles Omenihu. So go get paid, Mike Dana. Happy for you, man. But if I'm Kansas City, I'm not handing out that contract. So yeah, guys, that'll do it. Those are all the impending Kansas City Chiefs free agents this offseason. My opinion on them and whether the Chiefs should let them go or keep them around. So I want to hear from you guys down below. Do you agree with me, disagree with me on any of these players? Who do you want to see the Chiefs keep in free agency, and who are you ready to see say goodbye? Let me know. But with all that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Chiefs fans can find this. And make sure you check out my work on showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com for more. Go Chiefs!